Once upon a time, in a faraway land.
What are fairy stories?
The strange and wondrous place where nothing is as it seems.
Magic mirror on the wall. Who is the fairest?
Fairy is a perilous land.
Before she found herself falling down what seemed to be a very deep well.
It is the place you visit
A world
in your
of
dreams.
myth and magic.
When the clock began to
The
chime
evening
midnight,
star sailed down through the
A
sky.
mysterious voice began calling to the sad
She
princess.
pricked her finger with her needle. 3 drops of blood fell on the
In a
small
trance,
white
she
finger.
followed the haunting
And peered
sound
into the
up a
hollow
winding
tree.
stairway to the top of the
You
tower.
can read along with me in your book.
waved her wand and said the magic words.
Let's begin now.
Well met, witches, and welcome to Storybook, Sacred Lore of Witchcraft. We've gathered tonight to hear a piece of sacred lore. Our guest in the circle tonight, Ben Stimpson, has chosen a tale to narrate for us. Gather round.
The Brave Little Tailor, Das tapfere Schneiderlein. This version of the story comes from Selected Folktales, a dual-language book, edited and translated by Stanley Applebaum. One summer morning, a little tailor was sitting on his table by the window. He was in a good mood, and he was sewing with all of his might. Then, outside, a farmer's wife came down the street crying, "Good jam for sale! Good jam for sale!" That was music to the little tailor's ears. He thrust his delicate head out the window and called down, "Up here, dear lady! Here you'll sell your wares!" The woman climbed the 3 flights up to the tailor's with her heavy basket and had to take out every one of the pots for him. He inspected them all carefully, lifted them up, put his nose to them, and finally said, "The jam looks good to me. Give me 2 ounces of it, my dear lady. I don't care if it's even a quarter of a pound." The woman, who had hoped to make a much better sale, gave him what he asked for, but left vexed and muttering. "Now may God bless this jam for me," cried the little tailor, "and give me power and strength." He fetched bread from the cupboard, cut himself a slice, the full width of the loaf, and spread the jam on it. "This won't taste bitter," he said, "but first I want to finish the jerkin before I sink my teeth in." He placed the bread next to him, went on sewing, and in his joy took bigger and bigger stitches. Meanwhile, the aroma of the sweet jam ascended to the wall, where a large number of flies were resting, so that they were tempted to come down, and they settled on the bread in swarms. "Say, who invited you?" asked the little tailor, as he chased away the unbidden guests. But the flies, which didn't understand German, refused to be ejected, and they returned in an increasingly numerous party. Then, as the saying goes, the little tailor had it up to there. From the space under his table he reached for the rag, and crying, "Wait now, you're going to get it!" he lammed into the mass unmercifully. When he moved back and counted the victims, no fewer than 7 lay dead before him with rigid legs. "Is that the great fellow you are?" he said, compelled to admire his own bravery. "The whole town has to hear about this." And in his haste, the little tailor cut out material for a belt, sewing it together and embroidered onto it in big letters, 7 at one blow. "What do I mean, town?" he continued. "The whole world has to hear." And his heart jumped for joy like the wagging of a lamb's tail. The tailor tied the belt around his waist and determined to go out into the world, because he thought his workshop was too small for his bravery. Before he left, he looked around the house to see if there was anything there he could take along, but all that he found was an old cheese, which he put into his pocket. Outside the town gate, he noticed a bird that had gotten caught in the bushes, so into the pocket went the bird too. Now he set out bravely on his journey, and because he was lightweight and nimble, he felt no weariness. His path led him up a mountain, and when he had reached the highest peak, there sat an enormous giant, who was looking around completely at ease. The little tailor went up to him confidently and addressed him as follows. "Oh, hello. I guess you're sitting here and looking at the great big world. I'm just on my way there, trying to try my wings. Do you feel like going along?" The giant looked at the tailor with contempt, saying, "You bum. You good for nothing." "Huh, that's what you think," replied the little tailor, unbuttoning his jacket and showing the giant his belt. "You can read here what kind of man I am." The giant read 7 at one blow and thought it referred to people the tailor had killed. Then he felt some respect for the little fellow, but he wanted to test him first. He picked up a stone and squeezed it until water came out of it in drops. "Do the same thing," said the giant, "if you're strong enough." "Is that all?" said the tailor. "For my sort, that's child's play." He reached into his pocket, took out the soft cheese, and pressing it until the liquid ran out. "I imagine that was a little better," he said. The giant didn't know what to say, and didn't think it possible that such a small man could do this. And the giant picked up a stone and threw it so high that it was hardly visible to the eye. "Now, little Drake, do the same thing." "Oh, nice throw," said the tailor. But the stone did eventually fall to the ground again. "I'll throw one that won't ever return." So he reached into his pocket and took out the bird, and he threw it into the air. Now, happy to be free, the little bird ascended, flew away, and never returned. "How do you like that one, pal?" the tailor asked. "Yes, you are good at throwing," the giant said, "but now let's see if you're capable of carrying a decent weight." He led the little tailor to a mighty oak tree that had been cut down and was lying on the ground, and he said, "If you've got the strength, help me carry the tree out of the forest." "Sure," said the little man. "Just take the trunk on your shoulders. I'll lift and carry the boughs and the branches. After all, that's the heavier part." So the giant took the trunk on his shoulder. But the tailor sat down on a bough, and the giant, who was unable to look back, had to carry off the whole tree by himself, as well as the little tailor. And in the back, the tailor was quite merry and cheerful, and whistled the song, "Three tailors rode out of the city gate," as if carrying the tree were child's play. After the giant had dragged the heavy load some distance, he couldn't go on, and he shouted, "Listen, I've got to drop this tree." And the tailor jumped off nimbly, embraced the tree with both arms as if he'd been carrying it the whole time, and said to the giant, "Oh, big fellow like you, and you can't even carry a tree?" They journeyed on together, and when they came to a cherry tree, the giant seized the top of the tree where the ripest fruit was hanging, bent it down, placed it in the tailor's hand, and told him to eat. But the little tailor was much too weak to hold on to the tree, and when the giant let it go, the tree sprang up again, and the tailor was catapulted into the air along with it. When he had landed unharmed, the giant said, "What's this? Don't you have the strength to hold on to a thin twig like that?" "It isn't lack of strength," the little tailor replied. "Do you think that that would give you trouble to someone who took out 7 at one blow? I leaped over a tree because the hunters down there are shooting into the shrubbery. You make the same jump if you can." So the giant tried, but couldn't get over the tree. He got caught in the boughs, so that this time too the little tailor had the upper hand. The giant said, "If you're such a brave fellow, come with me to our cave and spend the night with us." The little tailor was willing and followed him. When they reached the cave, other giants were sitting by the fire there. Each of them had a roast sheep in his hand and was eating it. The little tailor looked around and thought, "There's really much more space here than in my workshop." The giant showed him a bed and told him to lie down on it and sleep his fill. But the bed was too big for the little tailor. He didn't lie down on it, but crept into a corner. When it was midnight, the giant thought the little tailor was fast asleep. He got up, took a big crowbar, and just destroyed the bed with one blow, thinking he had put an end to the grasshopper. Very early in the morning, the giants went into the forest. They had thoroughly forgotten about the little tailor when he suddenly came striding by, quite merry and impudent. The giants were frightened, and fearing he would kill them all, they ran away hurriedly. The little tailor travelled on, constantly following his pointy nose. After walking a long time, he arrived at the courtyard of a royal palace, and since he was tired, he lay down on the grass and fell asleep. While he lay there, people came, observed him from every angle, and read on his belt 7 at one blow. "Ah," they said, "what is this great war hero doing here in peacetime? He must be a mighty lord." They went and reported this to the king. Their belief was that if war should break out, he would be an important and useful man, who would by no means be allowed to depart. The king approved of this advice, and he dispatched one of his courtiers to the little tailor to offer him a military position when he woke up. The envoy remained with the sleeper, waited till he stretched his arms and legs and opened his eyes, and then made his proposal. "That's exactly why I came here," the little tailor replied. "I'm willing to enter the king's service." And so he was given an honourable reception, and special lodgings were assigned to him. But the military men were hostile to the little tailor, and they wished him 1,000 miles away. "How will this turn out?" they said to one another. "If we quarrel with him and he strikes us, 7 will fall at each blow. Ordinary men like us couldn't withstand him." So they reached a decision, went all together to the king, and requested their discharge. "It isn't in us," they said, "to hold out against a man who kills 7 at one blow." The king was unhappy about losing all his faithful servants for the sake of one man, and he wished he had never set eyes on the little tailor. He would have liked to get rid of him too, but he didn't dare discharge him because he was afraid the stranger might kill him and all his subjects and place himself on the royal throne. For a long time his thoughts ran in all directions, and finally he hit upon a ruse. He sent to the little tailor and had him told that since he was such a great war hero, he had a proposal to make to him. In a certain forest in his country there lived 2 giants who were causing great damage by robbing, killing, scorching, and burning. No one could get near them without putting his life in peril. If he were to conquer and kill these 2 giants, he would give him his only daughter as a wife, with half the kingdom as his dowry. Also, 100 cavalrymen would go along to assist him. "Oh, that will be a good deal for a man like you," said the little tailor. "The offer of a beautiful princess and half a kingdom doesn't come along every day." "Oh, yes," was his reply. "I'll definitely subdue the giants, and I don't need the 100 cavalrymen to do it. A man who kills 7 at one blow doesn't have to be afraid of 2. The little tailor set out, and the 100 cavalrymen followed him. When he reached the edge of the woods, he said to his escort, "Just halt here. I'll surely polish off these giants on my own." Then he dashed into the wood, looking to the right and to the left. After a while he caught sight of the 2 giants. They were lying under a tree asleep and snoring so hard that the boughs were dancing up and down. The little tailor, not at all lazy, filled both pockets with stones that he gathered and climbed up the tree with him. When he was in the middle, he slid along a bough until he was sitting directly over top of the sleepers. Then he dropped one stone after another onto the chest of one of the giants. For a long time the giant didn't feel anything, but he finally woke up and gave his companion a poke and said, "Why are you hitting me?" "You're dreaming," the other one said. "I'm not hitting you." They lay down to sleep again, and the tailor threw a stone down on the second giant. "What's the meaning of this?" the second giant cried. "Why are you throwing things at me?" "I'm not throwing things at you," the first one replied, grumbling. And they quarreled for a long time, but because they were tired, they made up, and their eyes shut again. The little tailor resumed his game, sought out the heaviest stone, and threw it onto the first giant's chest with full force. "That's going too far," the giant shouted. He jumped up like a madman and pushed his companion against the tree, making it tremble. The second giant repaid him in kind, and they worked themselves up into such a great fury that they uprooted trees and mauled each other until they finally fell down dead at the same moment. Now the little tailor jumped down. "It was lucky," he said, "that they didn't uproot the tree I was sitting on, or else I'd have had to leap onto one of them like a squirrel, but men of my sort are He drew his sword and gave each one a few hefty cuts on the chest. Then he went out to the cavalrymen and said, "The job is done. I polished them both off. But it was a tough going. In their distress they uprooted trees to defend themselves, but none of that does any good when someone like me comes along, who can kill 7 at one blow." "Aren't you even wounded?" the cavalryman asked. "Are you kidding?" the tailor replied. "They didn't harm a hair on my head." The cavalrymen refused to believe him and rode into the forest, where they found the giants drenched in their own blood, while the uprooted trees were scattered all around. Little Tailor requested the promised reward from the king, who now regretted his promise and plotted once more how to get the hero off his hands. "Before you receive my daughter and half the kingdom," he said to him, "you must accomplish another hard, heroic feat. In the forest is a unicorn who is running around and creating great havoc. First you must catch it." "Oh, I'm even less afraid of unicorns than two giants, 7 at one blow, that's my speed." He took along a rope and an axe, went out into the forest, and once again ordered the men who had been assigned to him to wait outside the woods. He didn't have to search very long. Unicorn came up very soon and made a dash right at the tailor, as if it intended to skewer him without much to do. "Easy, easy," he said. "Things won't go as fast as all that." He remained standing there where he was and waited until the animal was very close. Then he nimbly hopped behind the tree. The unicorn ran against the tree with all its might, ramming its horn so firmly into the trunk that it didn't have the strength to pull it out again, and so it was caught. "Huh, now I've got the critter," said the tailor. He came out from behind the tree, first put the rope around the unicorn's neck, then chopped the horn loose from the tree with his axe. When everything was in order, he led the animal away and brought it to the king. The king still refused to grant him the promised reward and made a third demand. Before the wedding, the tailor must first catch a wild boar that was creating great havoc in the forest. The huntsman would go back with him. "Gladly," said the little tailor, "that's child's play." He did take the huntsman along into the forest, and that suited them fine because numerous times in the past the wild boar had given them such a reception that they had no desire to pursue it. When the boar caught sight of the tailor, it charged him with foaming mouth and gnashing tusks, intending to knock him down again. But the agile hero dashed into a nearby chapel, and immediately jumped out of the high window again at one bound. The boar had run in after him, but once outside the building, the tailor darted around it and slammed the door shut on the boar. Then the raging beast was trapped, since it was much too heavy and clumsy to jump out the window. The little tailor called over the huntsmen so that they could see the captive with their own eyes, and the hero made his way to the king, who now, whether or not he wanted it or not, had to keep his promise, and hand over his daughter, and half the kingdom. Had he known that it wasn't the war hero, but a little tailor that stood before him, he would have felt even worse about it. And so, the wedding was celebrated with great splendor and little joy, and the tailor became a king. One night sometime afterward, the young queen heard her husband talking in his sleep. "Boy, finish that jerkin and mend those trousers or you'll feel my ell measure on your ears." And then she realized what alley her young lord was born in. The next day she lamented her woe to her father, asking him to rid her of that man, who was nothing but a little tailor. The king comforted her, saying, "This coming night, leave your bedroom unlocked. My servants will be waiting just outside, and after he falls asleep, they'll go in, tie him up, and carry him into a ship that will take him out into the wide world." The tailor's wife was satisfied with that, but the king's squire, who had overheard everything, quite liked the young husband, and secretly reported the whole plot to him. "I'll take proper measures in that matter," the little tailor said. In the evening he went to bed with his wife at the usual time. When she thought he had fallen asleep, she got up, opened the door, and lay down again. The little tailor, who was only pretending to be asleep, began to cry out loud, "Boy, finish that jerkin and mend those trousers, or you'll feel my ell measure on your ears. I've demolished 7 at one blow, killed 2 giants, led away a unicorn, and captured a wild boar, and should I be afraid of the men who are standing outside my bedroom?" When they heard the tailor say that, they were stricken with great fear and ran as if the wild hunt was after them. None of them was willing to face him any longer. And so the little tailor was and remained a king for the rest of his life.
When we next gather, Ben will join us again to discuss why this story is meaningful to him, and how we may incorporate the wisdom from this tale into our own practice. Until then, may all your travels be filled with wonder.